Oh, sorry. Live, okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and you're all very, very welcome here to this event on preparing for a new Ireland. And this is an event that is being hosted by Ireland's Future. Some of you will see some of the material that we have set out on the chair's information. So I just want to give you a little bit of background, and bear in mind this is also my first time ever chairing an event. I've done it a little bit online, but so bear with me. I'm a little bit nervous, so bear with me, and I do have my notes in front of me. So just to say a little bit about Ireland's Future. Ireland's Future was established to advocate for and promote debate and discussion about the future of Ireland, including the possibility of new constitutional arrangements on the island. Ireland's Future is not a political party and is not affiliated with any political party, and we welcome participation from people from all political persuasions interested in furthering the goals of Ireland's future. Now, we all know that Brexit has dramatically changed the social and political dynamic on the island, and the prospect of a new constitutional arrangement is definitely growing, and conversations are happening all over Ireland around kitchen tables and in bars and in cafes about this issue. It's fitting that Ireland's Future should begin its series of meetings here in Cork, the most southern of counties. It highlights the need that all of the people of Ireland, no matter where you live, should be given the opportunity to be part of this national debate about the importance of planning and preparing for our country's future. The constitutional future of Ireland is daily in the news. More and more people from the Nationalist and Unionist background are taking part in the debate. Ireland's Future is playing a lead role in providing a platform to all shades of political opinion nationally. In addition to this, there have been many polls indicating growing support for Irish independence and a new shared Ireland. So today's panel reflects the diversity of the people of this country. They will address the main issues that are in the fore in this debate. These include planning and preparing for a referendum on constitutional change, reconciliation with Unionists, the need for a prosperous, fair and vibrant economy, the need for a national health service free at the point of access, paid for by people's progressive taxes, and the need for the Irish government to lead the debate and bring its resources to it. So I'm going to introduce you to our panellists today. Firstly, I'm going to do it in alphabetical order. Firstly, we have Laura Harmon. Where are you, Laura? You're down there. Is a Cork woman and an LGBTQ+ and a women's rights activist. She was a candidate for the Shannon NUI panel in 2020, is a former president of the Union of Students in Ireland, and was the first woman to fill the role in 20 years. In 2018, Laura was mobilisation team lead for the Together for Yes referendum campaign. In 2015, Laura also played a significant role in the successful marriage equality referendum campaign. And next we have Tadhg Hickey. Tadhg is a comedian, an actor, a writer, a director, a musician, and general morale booster around Cork, and that's for sure. He was creative director of sketch comedy troupe and production company CC Cahoots, who had several critically acclaimed RTE TV shows. Since going solo, his political comedy sketches have earned millions of views on Twitter, and I, for one, am one of your followers, that's for sure. We then have Owodunni Ola Mustafa. Ola is an activist, a writer, a founder of Ballyhonus Inclusion Project, is an asylum seeker who still lives in direct provision, has been in direct provision for the last 7 years. Ola is also the recipient of the Christine Buckley Volunteer of the Year Award 2019. Ola, you're very welcome to Cork.
Thank you.
We have TD James O'Connor down there at the end, Fianna Fáil TD for Cork East, who was elected to Dáil Éireann at the age of 22, elected to Cork County Council at the age of 21, is currently the youngest member of the Oireachtas and a member of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly. And finally, where are you, Reverend Karen Sutherman, the first female Baptist minister on the island of Ireland, currently a pastor of a peace and reconciliation hub based in Belfast, is a champion of social justice. Karen feels particularly called to minister outside the church walls. Karen is a columnist for Belfast Media Group and the former chaplain to 2 Belfast Lord Mayors. And you're all very, very welcome today, so thank you all. I'm going to start off our questions today. So I suppose the format of the day is, for the first 45 minutes, I'll be asking questions to our panellists, and then we will, for the last 45 minutes, we'll be throwing out questions to the floor. So any questions you have, think about them, and anything might come up throughout this discussion. So, James, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much.
And you're a Cork man, I believe. You're from, is it East Cork?
That's right. From between Middleton and Youghal, from a place called Killa. So many of you might be familiar with that. So it's possibly one of the furthest locations away from Northern Ireland. So I hope I could bring a different perspective from a geographical point of view anyway than many participants in the discussion so far. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Thanks, James. Good to have you. Beautiful part of the world. So I suppose the main thing that we want to avoid, when the border poll is called, is people not having the full facts on what reunification means. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We should learn a lesson from the Brexit referendum, where there was a huge lack of knowledge on the impact of what Brexit would mean. So I've 2 or 3 questions here that I'm going to throw out to you, all in the one go. Do you agree that the government should lead in the research on issues such as an all-island health service, and should they do the necessary research and costing of such a service? And should this research also be undertaken in the other areas of greatest concern, namely housing and education?
Yes, to answer it quite simply. And I think from the perspective of looking at this particular issue around a proposal for a new Ireland, for United Ireland, in terms of the different terminology that has been used about this entire process, I think we have to accept as an island that this will require many, many years of research, of analysis, looking at many different sectors of our economy, about the societal issues around the conflict that we had on the island for many generations, and getting a better understanding of that. But in terms of the integration and potentially looking at having some type of a 2-state solution, which has been done internationally as well, all of these questions need answers. And in order to get these answers, we need to undertake an enormous body of research. The establishment of the Shared Island Unit within the Department of Taoiseach was significant. It's about bolstering activity both north and south, and to increase interaction between all different communities, irrespective of their political position on the issue of United Ireland. But I do feel government has a very strong role to play in this particular area. And that's why I was one of the first people in the political world, and particularly in Dáil Éireann, to call for the establishment of a political unit to look at the issue of reunification. Having a Minister of State perhaps within the Department of Foreign Affairs or within the Department of Taoiseach, to have political oversight, to put in train a process that will take many, many years. But it's also worth saying, Francis, if you look perhaps each border issue internationally is different. Not all border conflicts are the same. And particularly in the context of what happened in Germany, the Department of the Interior of Western Germany actually took over the reunification process with no preparation at all. So there is different situations internationally when you look at them, when you do some research on them. So from my point of view, I'd like to see us doing our homework, and we should particularly learn, Francis, from the mistakes of what happened in terms of the referendum in Scotland.
Yeah. Thanks, James. And just I suppose on the Shared Island Unit, do you think that the Shared Island Unit are doing enough around planning and preparing if in case there was a referendum? I mean, we all know that the Secretary of State could call a referendum at any time. We don't know what the criteria for that is. So what's your thoughts on that around, do you think that the Shared Island are doing enough around the planning for preparing for this referendum that could possibly be called at any time?
We're really hitting off a fascinating point, and it's something that many people are unaware of, but particularly when they haven't been involved in the entire process around the Good Friday Agreement. But obviously the Secretary of State has a decision-making role in terms of calling that referendum. And something I worry about as a TD is that we no longer have our nearest neighbour as a reliable partner in a political sense. We know we've learned from Brexit that they're liable to surprise when it comes to political issues, including our role in the European Union and their own role within Europe. And you know, the decisions that the United Kingdom take may not always be in the best interest of the Republic of Ireland, and Brexit has shown all of us that. And something I would worry about is if the UK government in London were to decide that they may wish to have a referendum, and particularly with calls for a second Scottish referendum in independence. You know, you may ask yourself the question, would the UK see that as an opportunity, if that was to arise, to settle the question in Northern Ireland? Because I think throughout the course of the decade we are now in, we are definitely on a journey towards this question being put to the public in the relatively near future, when you look at what has been an issue dragging on for indeed centuries. You know, since you know, we've had people arriving into this island from across the world, and throughout British occupation as well, even the formation of Northern Ireland as it currently stands. And all of these questions have been out there for many, many centuries. And I think that, you know, what I would like to see is that if there was a question to be put before 2030, that we would be in a strong position going into that referendum with at least some analysis and research done on behalf of the state about what we have to say to the people of Northern Ireland. And I think above everything else, that is very, very important, talking from an elected representative in Dáil Éireann.
Yeah, thanks very much, James. Karen, how are you doing? I know, well, I firstly know that you do phenomenal work in your own particularly, I was going to say constituency, but it's kind of the same, you know, in your own community. Yeah. You do phenomenal work, particularly with young people. And I know you also don't represent the Unionist community here today, but you have many contacts in that community, and you have, you know, you've been kind of brought up in that community. I was just wondering, would you be aware of the desire in the Unionist community to discuss the constitutional future of Ireland, or what do you think would be the main concerns of the Unionist community?
Yeah, thank you for being here today and the opportunity to be here in beautiful Cork. It's a beautiful city. As you said, Francis, yes, I was born into a Protestant Unionist background. My family would still remain very strong Unionists. And so whenever I speak, I genuinely would not want to say that I speak on behalf of the Unionist people, simply because they have their own voice. I think our starting ground is remembering that this is already our home. It's not a case of, well, we're going to move forward, we're going to hopefully move into a new island, and the Unionists are welcome. The reality is, the starting place is, this is already our home. And if you pitch to a Unionist, a strong Unionist person, would you like to see a united Ireland? I think we all know the answer. The answer is no, because it's their identity. They want to be part of the United Kingdom. And actually, that's okay. I think our role is to continually extend the hand of welcome and compassion and grace and the desire to have dialogue and conversation. But I think the question changes in terms of, we know the answer to that, but I think where we find common ground is that we're all in agreement that the border pull is eventually going to come. Whether it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, that's where we will get that commonality with the Unionist people and the politicians, because recently we've heard in the media that they have recognised that that's most likely coming. And so I think that when we think of the whole idea of coming around a table for conversation and deliberating and discussing, what I would want to say to the Unionist community is that you've got to build your vision. You've got to convince people, because this is what we can learn from Brexit. The bottom line is, and the beautiful thing about democracy is that you and I will make our decision. But the reality is that we need to be convinced, where are we better? And so we can do our role and we can say, well, look, we think we would be better moving forward into something new. But actually, you need to do the same. And I would want to pay tribute to the groups that are doing that. So for instance, the UUP have a hashtag Union of People. There's Unite in UK. There's her loyal voice. There are groups that are doing this day in and day out. And so I think the commonality and the place to come together is the invitation to present what is best for us in the future, because the people will decide. And I think that's our common ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm. Can you say a little bit about, more recently, the work that you did with young people? And I know you spoke about it when you were up at the cross-party Oireachtas committee, the Good Friday committee, and I'm just wondering, and what you said that day was really inspiring, to be honest with you. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes, so as you were saying earlier, Frances, there's lots of conversations taking place, from the kitchen table to my teenagers to the pubs, the bars. These conversations are already happening, and I think that's why when it comes to our precious Unionist community, they need to be part of that, and that invitation is always there. But I'm also conscious that we are bigger than two communities, and I think we need to move away from that. And we need to recognise that Ireland is bigger than the Catholic and Protestant divide. And so one of the things that I was really keen to do is hear young people's voices on this. I wanted to hear, what do they think? And I'm going to read out, are you guys happy enough to hear a couple of responses? Because listen, there's nothing like young people to keep us oldies in check, you know. So what we did was, there was a group called the Bolster Community in Northern Ireland that took young people, approximately 100 young people away from all backgrounds. And they were doing like a leadership program with them called Up Front. And so I kind of contacted the CEO and I said, look, listen, as part of this and as part of Ireland's future team, could I pitch 3 questions to the young people? And they came back and said, yes, absolutely, and they would present it and feed back the information to me. I didn't ask the direct question, do you want a united Ireland? Because I don't think that's the starting point, okay? But I pitched the following questions. How do we make our home a better place to live? The second one, what are your dreams for our future together? And then the third one, if there was a message to our politicians and our governments, what would it be? So the first question, how do we make our home a better place? Ava, age 14. We need to start by making friends with each other. We are all just human beings. Can we make her president? I mean, sometimes it's a simple message that us oldies who've grown up in tribalism need to hear. Mm-hmm. Tom, 13, we need to acknowledge difference, including new people. Why? Because we all belong. James, 15, why can't we be more tolerant? Surely there is room for us all, regardless of who we follow. Kiva, listen to this, age 15. I want to grow up without ever having to face the sectarianism and the danger my parents faced when they were my age. We owe it to these young people to create a better home. Number 2, what are your dreams for our future together? Sinead, age 14. Integrated education, no conflict. She's my sort of girl, gets straight to the point. Tom, age 14, that the tensions and the fears between all of us will end. Ava, age 14, that everyone, I love this, is treated equally, regardless of your race, your religion, your sexuality, that we are together as one. And the last question, the message to the politicians and the governments. Jessica, age 15, love this. Give everyone an equal chance. James, age 15, where is the kindness in our government? We have so much to live for. Listen to this. Give us hope for a better future. I'm going to be really honest with you. I think we need to hear them, because there comes a time and a stage, Frances, where I think we will pass, well, I know, we will pass the baton on. And what I find really interesting, this is just a snippet of the answers, not once was a flag mentioned. Mm. And they represent my own children. And it's just a different scenario. And so I think that we need to hear their voices. And I loved listening to this, because we need to listen to children. We need to listen to all people.
Powerful. Thanks so much for that, Karen. And I think this kind of, I'm going to come to you now, Ola, if that's okay, because I think what you have said is almost really, I suppose, what you're saying in a way, you know, like what these young people are saying, give everyone an equal chance, you know, hope for the future. So, you know, Ola, the proclamation states that all children of the country should be cherished equally. And I think we do have a bit of a way to go on that, especially with the treatment of refugees in arriving in this country. And you still live in direct provision and have been for quite a while. So what do you think is most needed in a new Ireland to make it more welcoming for people who arrive here as asylum seekers or refugees? Ola?
I think to answer that question, I would like to pose a question again. If you asked about what's your perception of a refugee or an asylum seeker, I think for somebody who has not had any encounter with an asylum seeker or a refugee, the first thing that will come to your mind is somebody that came here for the money, or somebody poor or a disease-ridden somebody coming here for whatever reason. But that's not the case. Asylum seekers, refugees had lives prior to coming here. And I think it's just a matter of giving people opportunity to thrive. I just finished my master's in NUI Galway, and I'm an asylum seeker. At the same time, I did a BA degree as well. So I have 2 degrees, I have 3 degrees, and juggling that with parenting, I have 3 kids, one who is a child living with a disability. And, you know, combining all that and leaving people to keep wallowing behind the walls of those direct provision centers because you feel they are problematic or they are just here as a waste of resources. I think that's where the problem is majorly. And I think the kind of language that politicians throw out there when it comes to be it migrants or lone parents or even people who are who belongs to the LGBT community is just very dangerous rhetoric that we as the younger generation needs to start debunking right now if we are looking for a united Ireland or a better Ireland in the future. And like Karen was saying about listening to the voices of young people, I have seen a lot of refugee children, asylum seekers, children who spent decades living in direct provision, going out there now and doing fabulous things. An example would be Olama Jekodome, who is a presenter with RTE. A lot of them. It's just giving people the opportunity to thrive and looking beyond they came here for the money. Nobody crosses 7 rivers and 7 seas, like I usually say, only to come and, live off 38 euros. I would want to work. I would want to contribute to my own living wages. I would want to give back to the Irish society that opened their doors to me in the first place and not just be seen as, somebody who is leeching off other people's tax.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I ask you, Ola, the questions, and I'm going to ask a little bit off topic here, but it really isn't around direct provision, and what your thoughts are around direct provision and how personally, I'd like to see direct provision gone completely in a new Ireland. Can you say, in my last term in the Seanad, I was on the Justice and Equality Committee, and I went up and I visited some direct provision centres around the country, and I was horrified. They were glorified. They weren't even, you would get treated better in some of them in a prison, if you know what I mean, the way people were treated. So I just think if you could just tell us a little bit about, what your thoughts are around direct provision centres in the new Ireland.
I have spoken about the direct provision system a lot of time, and I think I have said that this system is not a system that should house people on a very long-term basis. And I came here in 2014, and it was during the time where we would go and queue for food. Imagine you queuing for food in the morning, and if you miss that food at 8 a.m. in the morning, a lot of us would want to stay in bed for a long time. But because the canteen would close at maybe 8:30 or 8:45, you would be forced to go and get that food, regardless of whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter if you are a vegetarian or you don't eat pork, they don't consider that whatever you're given is what you have to eat. And then your children goes to school in the afternoon and they are back to cold lunch because the food will be served at 12 or 12:30 in the afternoon. And they come back at 4 o'clock. And then you're serving that to them. And dinner is at 5 o'clock. And after that, the canteen is closed. It doesn't matter whether your children wants to eat later at night or whatever. But in 2015, when the Brian McMahon expert group was formed, we saw what the government did to that report. They kind of cherry-picked what they wanted to do, what they want to commit to. And we got, in the center where I stay in Ballyhonest, we got self-catering services. So we now have an on-site shop, and you get your raw food and you can cook by yourself. And imagine centers that still don't have that kind of facility now. Imagine you living in a center where you have not tasted your own cooking in the last 10 years or in the last 11 years. And how do you pass on those skills to your children? They don't have that social skills. They don't have that kind of skills to live out there independently. And I think that is something that we need to, kind of juxtapose what is legal and what is human. Is this right or is this wrong? I think the direct provision should serve as an avenue for orientation. Let people stay and get their PPS cards, get their vulnerability assessment done, and then moved to where they would live independently and supported to live independently like it used to be in the past. It was not as if asylum seekers started arriving in Ireland just yesterday. People have been coming in years and years ago, and there was no direct provision in existence, and nobody was battling an eyelid. Everybody was living peacefully until somebody conceived the idea of, let's just push these people behind the walls like we did with the people in the mother and baby homes. And I think that's a mistake that, the younger generations will look back at what their parents did and, be ashamed and say, I wouldn't have expected you to be a part of that kind of ideology, or kind of have that kind of thoughts behind your mind of treating fellow humans in that kind of inhumane way.
Yeah. Thanks all, and I totally agree. Taig, how are you doing? There's a lot of. I mean, there has been a lot of calls for people from the south to understand the issues that are important to the Unionist community, and I think, what often happens is that even if you mention the word United Ireland, there's a kind of what's going to happen to you? And rightly so. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And while it is kind of essential that we make sure that the Unionist community feel part of and welcomed, that's very important. But do you think, and it was only when I kind of talked to you the other day and this kind of came up, do you think that the people in the south need to engage more with the nationalists, and get an understanding of how they would have felt abandoned down through the years, and how do you think this could be brought about?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd just like to say that as a lifelong Republican, I'm honoured, and if I brought nothing else to the room but enthusiasm today, I'd love to just say that it's so exciting for me, from somebody who was a kid obsessed with maps and flags and stuff, to look at like a little picture of Ireland and just say to my dad when I was about 7 or 8, like, why is that? Why are they two different colours? Like just a simple childhood kind of thing. Like, it looked to me like Ireland was too small to be separated, and I still kind of feel like that a little bit. But for the conversations to have accelerated, and obviously Brexit has been horrific and people are still dealing with it, but if the one thing to come out of it that we can all, maybe in the room here, celebrate is that it has furthered this conversation, I think that's very, very exciting, and I'm very honoured to play any small little part in that whatsoever. But to go back to your question, yeah, like it's something that I think, especially as we're starting these conversations now, and what's lovely about this, and fair play to Ireland's Future and Niall and Shared Ireland as well, those groups, they've been having these conversations and initiating them for a long time. And it's nice that these conversations feel quite apolitical and that we're just throwing stuff out. And I think that's lovely, especially the stuff that Karen was saying there. I really thought, like, that's what it's all about, just throwing it out. And I think it's important to throw it out at the outset that I wouldn't like Northern Nationalists to miss the memo again, So whilst I think we have to reach out to Unionists, and you hear that as part of the conversation all the time, and it's 100% true, but I think for reconciliation to happen and for this conversation to move forward, I think the South has to reach out to Northern Nationalists and acknowledge, maybe for the first time, I've never heard it, certainly not by a head of state, or even generally, that 100 years ago, I think as Frank Gallagher put it, 6 counties were sacrificed so that 26 could have their freedom. And successive Irish governments and people in the South have, we effectively pulled up the drawbridge and we got on with building our own kind of Catholic De Valera girls dancing at the crossroads kind of state. And we basically let the North to their own devices in what was, everyone will agree now, a sectarian statelet. And I think it's wrong, and I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of Northern Nationalists, but I think the onus is on the South to reach out, and the least we can do now is to drive these conversations forward with enthusiasm, and we need to reach out, we need to say, do you know what, that was wrong, and what's going on now is still wrong, because it's not like that was a blip in history. There's still, you know, I'm kind of robbing a Danny Morrison point here, but, you know, people in the South will use the word Ireland, for instance, and they're referring to the 26 counties. And I think we need to acknowledge what level of trauma that does, because you get this picture of the North, the Nordies as the kind of angry Nordies. Well, my experience when I was in West Belfast recently was, it's more hurt than anything that, like, they're regularly forgotten about, and it's like they're not properly Irish. If we're talking about Ireland and we're talking about the 26 counties, it's like they've missed the ticket. They're certainly not British, but we're telling them that they're not Irish. They can't vote in presidential elections. They can't enter wonderful RTE competitions. So, you know, they're being excluded, and I think that's wrong. And from my time up there, you're hanging out with people who hang tricolours outside their houses and pubs. They all speak Irish far better than I ever will. They're more knowledgeable of their Irish history, you know, and to call these people not Irish, I think, is tantamount to kind of making them stateless. And I think that's a trauma that needs to be looked at. Now, what can we do on the positive to get more positive about it? The first thing I think we can do is to go visit them. So obviously, like on the border, people are, you know, they're working in one jurisdiction and coming over the other side. But I think in Dublin and Cork as well, I'll speak of my own home city for a moment. Like a lot of my friends like have worked in Australia and the Middle East, and they've been to America like 40 times. They've never been to the North. You know, it's just, and I have to say, like, it's not that bad. I'd recommend it. It's great crack. I had the time of my life in West Belfast, and I don't know how I got home. But no, I do think there's a serious point there. Like, I mean, like, I was talking to obviously Republicans when I was up there, but I was talking to just, like, I think what Brendan O'Leary might describe as cultural Catholics. So they're not like passionate Republicans, but they're from a nationalist background. And they're aware, like, that the South feels like this place might be Timbuktu. There's no connection, I think, mentally. And I do feel the onus there is on the South. Just like in these conversations, the onus is on the South. We need to get away from this mentality of how are we going to, will we take the North on? The question is, how do we sell ourselves to the North? Because this state is broken in many ways. Like, so we should be driving the conversation forward and reaching out in a way that we didn't do 100 years ago and we haven't done for 100 years. So I hope that these conversations will always keep in mind that issue for nationalists. So go and visit them, have a bit of crack up there, and let's get the conversations going.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I love what you said there. How do we sell ourselves to the North? You know, and I think that's a question that we do probably need to start asking ourselves. And we also have the whole, I mean, I don't know if anybody would have been aware recently of the whole Game of Thrones thing, where people they're not even aware that they're actually going up to the north, you know, to the 6 counties to see the Dark Hedges. It's like they're just going up, you know, so it's just part of, you know, the island of Ireland. But when you say that thing around how do we sell ourselves to the North, what's your thoughts on that? How do we sell ourselves to the North?
Well, I think we have to try and, as everyone has been saying, and as Ola put so beautifully, like, we need to look at the things that aren't working here. There's a lot of things that are broken here from the ground up. But that's, I think, without getting political about it, then that's what's so exciting about this period, because you don't want to attempt to bolt the North onto the South. It's about as Karen has touched on, it's kind of like starting from scratch again. And it's like, well, how can we build a shared island together then? How would an all-Ireland economy look, for instance? And I know we might touch on that stuff later, but that's about building bridges to kind of create something that will work for all of us, because it feels like the two separated don't work. I mean, partition has failed the North primarily. I mean, the South obviously has failed in the South as well, but partition has really failed the North. And like, Belfast was the centre of industry and commerce and before partition, and it has just decreased across all metrics since. And even after the Good Friday Agreement, when investment came in in peacetime, the South disproportionately gained from that period and the North didn't. So it's just across the board with, you know, two bureaucracies and two currencies. It makes no sense, really. And again, as Karen touched on, the thing is, it's coming. Either way, it's coming. And that's, again, Karen said, it's now probably a little bit up to Unionists to kind of say, to show us, you know, what does the union have to offer? Because even just pure demographics, it's on the way. And I think we need to be planning right now, to touch on, sorry, what James was saying earlier as well. We should have been planning a long time ago. Like, I mean, to put it in some sort of context, like, and I'm robbing a Brendan O'Leary point here, but like, South Korea has had a ministry of reunification for the last half a century. So like, I mean, however crazy it is up north, like, it's not that crazy. So we need to get going.
Thanks, Ty.
Brilliant.
I think that kind of leads us into yourself, Laura. And, you know, I think there are many reasons why the Protestant Unionist community would justifiably have been against reunification with the 26 counties in the past, when it was unduly influenced by the Catholic Church. And civic society played a huge part through the Citizens' Assembly in bringing significant change to society in the South on issues that were considered difficult to debate and manage. Marriage equality, for example, and the repeal referendum. So, and again, this is something, I think, is a really important question. Like, would a Citizens' Assembly help develop the argument about constitutional change? And can you say a little bit about that, bearing in mind, you know, your involvement in those two particular referendums? And can you say a little bit about the planning and preparing also, and the importance of planning and preparing for a Citizens' Assembly?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So yeah, my name is Laura and I'm from Cork. Originally been living in Dublin for the last 9 years, from Gaeltacht to Balavorna originally, so grew up in Cork. So just before I get to the question, I suppose I just want to say that I find, you know, this an extremely exciting initiative from Ireland's future, and I think having a series of conversations across the country will be really, really important, and making sure that everyone's voices are heard and that these are open discussions, that they're non-political. And I think it's testament that we have a full room here today, that there is so much interest in this conversation and having this conversation. So I just wanted to say that. And I guess as well, I just wanted to say that, I mean, I think partition, you know, has failed, and I think it was partition itself was extremely ill thought out. There was not a lot of planning that went into that. So that is why it's so important while we're having these conversations, if we're preparing or working towards a referendum, that we make sure there's as much planning as possible and discussions that go into it. And I think the conversation has been particularly accelerated because of Brexit, and also because of COVID, because of the pandemic. I mean, having two healthcare systems on one island, I don't think has been very effective, and I think it's has really shown up, you know, in recent months, how that hasn't worked. So I think this conversation, opening it up, provides such a great opportunity in terms of talking about rights, in terms of talking about culture, in terms of talking about education across the island as well, and how we can you know, potentially build a one education system on the island, and how history is taught is so different, you know, in the south and in the north. I think these are things that need to be looked at. So just to get to the question around the Citizens' Assembly, so yeah, I was involved with the marriage referendum and the referendum on the 8th Amendment. Both quite difficult, you know, conversations, and obviously would have been talked about over many years. Particularly, I think the referendum on the 8th Amendment, I mean, that conversation had been going on for decades. It was a very difficult conversation for many people, you know, on both sides of the debate. But I do think that citizens' assemblies played a really important role in both of those discussions, in preparing the groundwork. Now, many people might have said, well, are they not just kicking the can, you know, out of politics and you know, delaying the process? But I think it was really important, and it worked out really well to ensure that everyone's voices were heard. So for the marriage referendum, as I'm sure many of you know, will be aware, the Citizens' Assembly included a mixture of civil society, people from all backgrounds that were selected from the electoral register, And then also politicians from each party were represented. And then for the Eighth Amendment, it was just civil society primarily that was involved in the Citizens' Assembly, and they were randomly selected. So I know one thing that Ireland's Future is proposing is an all-Ireland Citizens' Assembly. And obviously Ireland's Future is very open to how that could be structured, very open to other people's opinions on that. And I'm sure many of you will have opinions on that, here today, and we'll probably have a discussion around it. But I guess what would be really important is, well, first of all, this discussion is happening, as we've said. We don't know when there may be a border poll, and it's really important that we get it right, that we make sure that everyone's voices are included. So I think an all-Ireland Citizens' Assembly could be a really great way of making sure that everyone's voices are included from all different backgrounds. So, from the Unionist perspective, we need to ensure that people from different cultural backgrounds are represented. The travelling community, for example, the Irish language community, people in direct provision, refugees. We need to make sure that all those voices are heard. So I think that would be a really important process for furthering this debate. And it's not to say that, politicians shouldn't be involved. I mean, absolutely, they'll need to step up to the plate and get their heads together and work together, North and South, on this issue. But I think it needs to be led by civil society, and I think that it's important that everyone from all age groups and backgrounds have their say on the matter. But I think this is something that needs to happen, without delay. I think it's really imperative that these processes are set up now, and that the planning occurs for them now, how it will work, how it would be structured, who would chair such a citizens' assembly, for example. You'd have to have a very, impartial, I suppose, respected person to chair, such a process. So there's so much planning that needs to go into it. I know that the Shared Ireland unit that was established by the government, obviously that's a very welcome initiative. But I do think more work needs to be done in terms of, say, a joint Oireachtas committee, in terms of, building these conversations all across the island. And I suppose I just want to say as well, just to add, I did work for the Union of Students in Ireland, during the marriage referendum and for a number of years. And I think actually the student movement on this island gets it really well, because there's a really strong connection between the student movement, in the north and in the south, and they work really well together on a number of different issues across rights, across education. So I think as a model there, I think young people in a way are leading the way in many senses. And I do think it's really important that young people's voices are included, and that they're engaged with this process, because it is about their future, primarily. And also, I think, there's a job of work there to be done as well in ensuring that, people are registered to vote ahead of any vote that might occur, to make sure that everyone can have their say in the discussions. So I might just leave it there, if that's okay.
Can I just follow up, and then we'll go to the floor then for questions. But just on the young people, because I do think that's a really, really important point that you made. How do you think we could bring young people with us in this conversation?
Well, I think the first thing is to make sure their voices are, valued, and that they are speaking at events like this, and that they're brought into any important discussions that are happening. There's a saying in Irish, Molan Oige agus Tukik Shi. So, I suppose, encourage the young and they will flourish. So the first thing is they need to be included in the debate. And, we did see during the marriage referendum, there was a lot of, say, discourse around, well, are young people actually going to turn out in this referendum? Are they going to bother to vote? Do they really care about politics? Do they really care about these issues? And I think that was absolutely proven wrong, because we saw the swathes of young people queuing up, the amount that registered to vote, to have their say, in recent referenda. And it's really important, I think, that they are included and that they're at the table as much as anyone else. And I think it's really, encouraging to hear the comments from Karen and the consultation that she's done. And I think that we need to be doing those consultations with young people and working with the student movement, working with, the second level students' unions, working with youth wings of political parties. So many young people are out there volunteering in so many different capacities, in the GAA, for example, in sport. So I think it's really important that we bring them into the debate just as much as anyone else, and that their voice is just as valued as anybody else.
Thanks so much, Laura. So, just conscious of time, I think we're going to go to the floor now, and Stephen has a mic, though. So if anybody has a question, we have, yourself, we've Stephen here in the second row. Just there. Thanks. No.
Thanks everybody for the contribution today. In particular, I think Tig made a very important point about the hurt in Northern Ireland, and it's very quiet. It's very quiet hurt, and it can take some time before you actually hear it. When I think of hurt, I suppose I'd be primarily thinking of the hurt of the nationalist community, particularly in the border areas. My family are from there. But because we always want to know what the other side thinks, and sorry to put it like that, but look, that's how most of us, we do think that way. Can I ask Karen, the invitation to dialogue and to conversation, is that perceived, do you think, by the Unionist, Protestant, whichever way, the other tradition or another tradition on the island, could that be perceived as a threat? That even the invitation to talk, you're trying to drag us into something that we don't want to be part of. And I say this as somebody who, I suppose, being honest, I don't understand this need for a UK identity, but I'm not going to fight it. Why would I? So that would be my first question, okay? Because sometimes the invitation to dialogue is like, we're not even going there. Okay? And my second question, which is actually quite a serious one, if there was a united Ireland, would we have to give up the tricolour?
You're asking me that directly?
Yes. I'm asking you that. But I'm asking you that based on a conversation I had in East Belfast in relation to the Union flag.
Sure.
Very easy to say, I should give up the Union flag. Sure. Do you know? Would we have to give up the tricolour?
Sure.
Thanks.
No, thank you for your questions. No pressure there. Again, what I would want to say, and I think I would want to expand on what Laura said. There is a them and us's culture in Northern Ireland, and it's very strong. I want to pay tribute and acknowledge the undecided, the middle ground, the silent majority. They are there. They are beginning to move into what I call the middle ground, and they want to be convinced. And so sometimes the voices that speak the loudest are not always reflective of what's going on. So I think that's important to say. But Laura mentioned about the Citizens' Assembly, and this is why I would be passionate about this, because, listen, I really love and respect our politicians. Thank you for everything you do, but we must shift this conversation to not solely be politically led, but people led. That's where I think the invitation is, because I think for the Unionist community, it's, well, it's their mandate, so we'll be giving in to that particular party, and you'll not be winning, and and you're not getting your say, and I'm not giving in, and so I think that's why we need to extend the conversation, and the table has to be widened to include a bigger voice that takes it out of that mindset of them and us's. That's my personal view on that. As I said at the beginning, listen, I got a message a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, well, your conversations about Ireland, I'm drawing up the drawbridge, want nothing to do with you, it's a big echo chamber. And you know what? That's how they feel. That's okay, we have to respect that. But don't listen all the time to certain voices. There are other voices, the voices of the youth, the voices of our Muslim community, the voices of other people that exist. So I would be passionate that we extend it, that it's not solely politically led, but it becomes people led. And that's where I think you'll start to hear other opinions. I'm from East Belfast. So you're asking me personally what I think of the flag? I think those are conversations that's all on the table. I absolutely love the tricolour, simply because it shows the green and the orange, and so, listen, I think that's on the table, you know, and I think the thing to remember as well, family or union grew up with the bands and the orange, and you know, and that's who they are, and so we need to have honest conversations that. And I think it can sound a bit, you know, you're welcome. No, it's not. Okay, this is our home. So what does our future look like where culture can be celebrated? And that includes the flag. Does that answer your question okay?
I think fair enough.
Does anybody else on the panel want to answer that question about the flag, James or Tig or Laura or Ola?
I think I might make my own contribution. The tricolour itself, like obviously the message of the tricolour is something I often think about. And obviously the green and the orange and the piece between it, the white. And I think it would be a great shame to lose it. It's actually, you know, the debate around the national anthem is something that I would think there would be a lot of challenges if we ever did have United Ireland, because we have to remember the wording and the translation, of course, soldiers who we are in terms of the first opening line. And I think that would be quite challenging. But on the tricolour, I'd personally like to see it being kept. But we have to ask ourselves as you know, a nationalist community in the Republic of Ireland, what would that mean to the Unionists in Northern Ireland, and how inclusive they would feel that remaining in place would be. But above all else, I'd love to see us communicate the meaning of the tricolour. And many people in the Republic of Ireland are not even aware of its particular meaning. You know, I think it was a Waterford man, Thomas Francis Maher, who I have a lot of similarities with. Actually, he tried to run for Parliament in his early 20s. And, you know, the message of the tricolour, and in terms of its relation to the tricolore in France as well, there's beautiful meaning to it. And that's why it means a lot to me. It's one of the first things I did as a TD was I bought myself a flag for my own office and for my constituency office as well. And communicating its meaning is going to be quite important to see if we can actually retain it.
Thanks. And Tig, do you want? No.
Yeah, like I love the flag, definitely, but I think it'd be remiss to go into a discussion that throws everything out on the table with any red lines. And I also think it's probably at the end of a process. So like these conversations should at the moment focus on what does United Ireland look like? Like we haven't even really discussed whether it's some sort of a federacy and Stormont prevails, or if it's like a unified Ireland and Stormont is gone. Like what you don't want, and people have obviously already touched on it, like what you don't want is for the Secretary of State of Northern Ireland to call a referendum, and we have no planning done, because then we don't know what we're trying to sell. So that whatever small hope we have of bringing Unionists into a really well thought out plan for what the Ireland will look like economically, socially, in terms of the Constitution, we have no chance if we don't do that planning. So I think things like flags and stuff will come at the end of all that process. Now, having said all that, I'd love to keep the flag.
Yeah, I'll come. Stephen, there's somebody here has their hand up there in the brown jumper.
Hi everybody, thanks very much. I really enjoyed the panel. My name's Aman, I'm from Glasgow. I've been in Cork since 2015. One of the questions that I've thought about for several years here is, what does it mean to be Irish in this modern changing Ireland in 2021? I've not found the answer to that. When it comes to identities, I grew up in Glasgow. I know what it means to be a Scottish Muslim of Pakistani descent. I know I've been to Belfast. I know how Muslims in Northern Ireland, because there's a long history, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of debate about what British Muslim means, where it came from. I don't feel that being here in Cork. There's terms, there's phrases that I grew up with. We're all Jock Tamson's bairns. Nicola Sturgeon says all the time, it's not where you came from, it's where we're all going. I don't hear that in Ireland at all. All I hear is that we are the other. That, you know, you're boxed in this very particular way. I don't hear this broad tent of Irishness, and I'm still not hearing enough from our elected officials, our leaders at all. And it's actually, I totally hear what you're saying there, and it actually makes me really emotional to say this, because I am a head of a department here at University College Cork. I have the privilege, till the hilt, but I still don't feel a part of this society. I still don't feel a part of Ireland. And every single day I wake up and I think, why do I not feel that? So what does it mean to be Irish in 2021 in this modern, changing Ireland? And I ask that to everybody on the panel. I ask that to everybody because I still haven't found an answer to this.
Laura, would you mind starting maybe? I know I'm throwing you in the deep end.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, I think that's a very difficult question. I think Irishness probably means different things to different people, first of all, and how you feel Irish. I totally get, your point around, this kind of othering that we have. I think there's a growing, sometimes feel there is a growing, not sure if it's growing or, obviously it's still been there, but we hear more and more reports of, racism, racist attacks. For example, our own Taoiseach's house was protested against during the week. It was a homophobic protest, I believe. So that is very worrying to me that there is these aspects within society. We've never had a very a super, right-wing party in this country, and I feel that is something that is kind of growing. We see people that were running for election maybe recently, and they would think taking cheap shots at say the traveller community, for example, or the Muslim community, that would win them votes, because I think I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but I think we saw that with Trump in the US, and I think there is a growing sort of very worrying right-wing movement across Europe as well, if we look at Hungary. And I think that's something we need to be very careful about in our society, is protecting against that, because that is not what Ireland stands for. That is not what the values of our constitution stand for, of the proclamation. So I think, to be Irish, I think is to be living here in this country, and I think everyone that lives here, is Irish and should be able to fully participate, in society, as a full citizen, should be able to vote. And a point was raised earlier as well. Citizens in the north can't even vote for the president in this country, and I think that's exclusion. I think it's an absolute abomination that the way people in direct provision are being treated, in terms of not being able to work or fully participate in society here. So, I would say that being Irish is something we should look at, in terms of ensuring that everybody on this island can participate fully, as a citizen, and feel valued as a citizen, regardless of their creed or their background, where they come from. And we definitely have a huge job of work. There's huge failings within the state in relation to that. And we've a long way to go yet. And I think that this discussion provides us an opportunity with, how to build that. But I think it's really important that the point that you've just made, and the people like you who feel like that are part of this discussion, and that are included, and that every voice is heard. And I'm sure there are lots of people that would agree with you, in how you feel. So I guess that would be kind of my take on it. I don't have a definitive answer as to what being Irish is, but I feel that everybody on the island should feel that they can fully participate within our economy, within our society, within our education system, within all aspects of society, and everyone should have that equal opportunity. And I know that full equality doesn't fully exist, and it should fully exist. So I'll leave it at that.
I want to agree with what you said about not having that feelings of you being Irish enough. What exactly does being Irish mean to me? From my own perspective, I think the Ireland or the Irish that we sell to the migrant community, or that the Irish people sell to us, is an island of compassion, an island of 1,000 welcome, an Ireland that is open to treating people in fairness, which is also in the Constitution of Ireland. But at every turn, in your journey in Ireland, there is something somewhere that still reminds you, or someone somewhere that still reminds you that your life is not complete. You know, you're not part of us. You will never be part of us, regardless of whether you speak the language, regardless of whether you know the history of Ireland in and out. There's still that someone, or that clause or something somewhere that still reminds you of you not being fully Irish. So I would say in terms of employment as well, you would see doctors who are coming in here and still begging the Irish government to fast track their citizenship. That is not the Ireland that we want to know. And that's a reminder that you came here, you're offering your service to promote this community. And yet, just this red passport that would give you the full access to you being able to fully participate in this society is being withheld from you, and that is not the Ireland that we want to see. I want to see an Ireland that I can get a leave to remain in Ireland, and I can still say that I'm part of this society. I'm part of something that brings a kind of wholeness to my life and gives my children or whoever it is that is, that belongs to my community or other migrants or black and ethnic minority groups, the something to look up to and something to be proud of. And I think that day would come. We were talking with Frances before the program started that the change would come, but it's always at a very slow pace in Ireland. And I hope that we will all live to see that change manifest.
Absolutely. Thank you. I have two people here, and then I'll come to yourself. Do you want to go? Yeah, okay, Stephen, go ahead. Yeah, okay, no problem.
Just to point to the whole panel on the point you made, Karen, the beautiful answers to the three questions, and I take it they would have been a fairly strong representation of all the answers. And I think to the panel, and I think you touched as well, Laura, when you finished up, how do we, there's a big difference between 15 and 25. So how do we harness, and we know that the majority of these kids will stay in the middle ground and they will continue with these views, but we also know there's going to be a percentage of them will fall back into sectarian ways and will get more staunch as they develop to the age of 25. How do we, maybe we can't answer that, but maybe we could agree that we need to find a way to stop that, and to ensure that what that 15-year-old is writing down today is what they're generally going to say at the age of 25. Yeah. And to harness that belief in a society and to bring it forward over the next decade, and I just think that would be an important part of the whole process,
Do you want to respond, Karen, in any way?
Yeah, that's a great point, because we are all influenced and we all have different influences in our life, and I want to tie it to what the gentleman said previously. To kind of make the point that I'm going to say, hopefully. I'm married to a guy, he deserves a medal. He's from India, and he's been here 30 years, and we have 3 children. And our daughter, Megan, the oldest one, who will be horrified if she's watching this knowing I'm going to talk about this, but last year she shared with us her experience of racism. And you can imagine, listen, the work that we do, but when it comes into your own home, you start to really realise we have a long way to go. And Megan's big thing, who was born in Belfast, raised in Belfast, her big thing is that, so she was feeling homesick. She would say she's Irish. She took her Irish flag with her to university. But she said, Mom, the thing that I grew up with and I still get is, but you're not really from here, so you're not. And that phrase was beginning to cause so much hurt and pain to her. And we could see that. And she's in her 20s now. And I think that whenever you pitch back to you in terms of our young people, I think that responsibility falls on us. Yeah. It falls on us whether we're north or south, whether we're parents or not, whether we're teachers or GAA supporters, whether we represent the Muslim community or whether we represent the travelling community. How we influence our young people is down to us. So if there is an open sharing of racism, then it's on us to stand up against it. It's on us to have that majority voice to say, Megan, do you know what? This is your home. And you need to be confident in that. And you need to know that you can champion a better way. And you say it with confidence. I am Irish. I may be a woman of colour, but I am Irish. And you'd be proud in that. But I owe it to that young person, to my daughter and other people who have experienced, to be able to take that story with their permission and say, this is not on. Because if we're going to move forward together, we need our shoulders to the wheel against all injustice, against our precious LGBT plus community, against refugees. And I think that it's down to influence, but I think it's got to start with me, and it's got to start with you. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Definitely. I definitely agree. There's a man here who's been trying to get in the front row. Yeah, yourself? Yeah. Do you want, we just have the mic there beside you.
Do you want me to take questions?
2 questions. Yeah, 2 questions. So after your question, we'll go to maybe yourself.
I've so much to say, it would take hours. Yeah. But there's a reference made to republicanism. Oh, I'm a Republican. And there's a document, look, that came out in 1995. And the signatories on the back of it include Billy Hutchison, Gusty Spence, and many others that are well-known household names in East Belfast and elsewhere. And just to give you a quote, in their document, Irish republicanism owes much to the radical ideals of Scottish Presbyterianism. And if you study McCracken and Wolfstone and all the others going right back, because that forms the basis of what is in Northern Ireland today, and indeed throughout the country today, you know. I was in the Bogside in 1969, 70. I lived in the Craigan, I lived in the Brandywell there, and I went up with rose-tinted glasses, drive the Brits out of Ireland kind of thing. And it was a learning curve for me. I came back from Northern Ireland with a totally different perspective of what the idea of drive the Brits out of Ireland or United Ireland. I was on the Springfield Road in Belfast in 72, and I'm a member of the Workers' Party, by the way, and one of our supporters from the village, and you know where the village is and its makeup, where she said, I want to show you something, as we were at a conference on the Springfield Road at the time in 72, and we went down to a junction, and there was a tent on the corner of the junction. And she says, there was a guy waiting this morning at 7 a.m. to be picked up to go and do a day's work in the building line. He has a young partner, a young baby and a partner at home, and his body is now lying there having been shot down. And she says, it doesn't matter who he was or where he came from, this madness has to stop. And the point I'm making is that there was 30 years of mayhem, of sectarianism, and what they're calling now for a border poll, I don't support it. We in the Workers' Party don't support it, not at this juncture. Our long-term aim is a unitary state, but you need to unite people first, and particularly at working class level. Because when I was on the Springfield Road in 1972, this same woman from the village said, they're Catholics going to their service, they're Protestant going to their service. There was no policemen, no army, no barricades. But if you go down to the Turf Lodge, Ballymurphy, the Shankill, Sandy Row, barricades, where working class people were doing the dying and working class people were doing the killing. Now, there was other factors there, the various provocateurs and the various gangs. And I tell you this much, it was a frightening experience in 1972 to be in Belfast. And we met Billy Hutchinson and other people. And by the way, there was a guy by the name of Billy Elliott, who was we were known as the Republican clubs that time in Northern Ireland. And Billy Elliott's body was found on the wayside on a Sunday morning, having been killed. The UVF people said he was killed by the Fur Coat Brigade of the Unionist Party, because the working class issues were not being addressed, and when they were being addressed, the working class people became the enemy then of the establishment. And the establishment is supported by when I hear politicians and talk like that, I'm a public rep, that's my building across the river there, and I don't regard myself as a politician. It's a dirty name in many ways, you know, because I saw the politicians working in 1970 when they were handing out money to various groups and various peoples to start up a war in Northern Ireland and use the base as the South. That's the history, Francis. Yeah. It needs to be said. As I say, I could stay here for hours and hours. But in relation to the National Health Service, I put a motion to the City Council about a year ago, and there's one or two of my colleagues there, I think. And I appealed to the Minister for Health that the HSE would contact the National Health Service in Northern Ireland. Because at the time, one of our members in Belfast, she's a nurse working in the National Health Service, she says, we'll survive. And she said that to me more recently, we'll survive here, but she says, I fear for the South next year. There's a tsunami of mental cases coming down. The HSE, as a public health body, will not function. So I leave it at that, Francis. But
thanks so much.
You know, and there's so many other points I could make.
Yeah, I know. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Go to yourself, not at all.
Thank you.
Very difficult to follow Ted at any time, but here today, that's. But I was just going to say I'm a political activist my whole life, and from the fight in the 70s for contraception rights and going through repeal and equality and all that, we've come some way. But one of the glaring omissions is constitutional change in relation to right to housing. I think it's a huge issue, north and south. I think, you know, even if we don't see a 32-county Ireland in the near future, we should still fight for things like that. And it leads into as well the fight against direct provision, to end direct provision. You cannot talk about direct provision on its own without linking it with deportation. No direct provision, no deportations. Direct provision is merely a holding pen. It's like leading cattle to slaughter for deportations. And you really cannot address one without the other. The right to housing should apply to everyone that lives on this island, no matter what the status, no matter whether they're citizens, whether they're asylum seekers, doesn't matter. Anyone living in the island, all who live here are welcome here, and they should all be treated to a constitutional right to a roof over their heads, and it's a huge issue.
Thank
it
you.
is enormous.
I'll come to our panellists on that.
Oh, and
subject.
also there is a campaign for an All-Ireland NHS, All-Ireland National Health Service. You'll find it on Facebook, and we've kept it going through COVID.
Okay, thanks a million. And we'll just go here, this here, 3 questions here, Mick. Yeah. Yeah, White, Bert. Yeah.
Yeah, Míle Buíochas, Francis, and Fáilte Rómh to the panel. And we're delighted that Cork is leading the way as usual, having the first of these conferences across the country. Just I would agree on the Citizens' Assembly. I think that's vital. No, I respect Ted, he's a colleague, but obviously I wouldn't agree with him. I do think we have to have an Irish unity poll in the near future. But you can have those conversations as part of the Citizens' Assembly, which will be a 32-county assembly, I would hope, and include people from all communities. And I think would also include in those conversations the point a man was saying as well. It includes new Irish communities as well, exactly what a new Ireland would look like, and have all those voices in there. I suppose as a Republican, I would think the 1916 Proclamation and the 1919 Declaration of Independence are a very good starting point. It was referenced there, the Proclamation, because it would be about a 32-county republic that's, you know, it's about based on justice, and it's based about on peace, and it's based on equality. So one question would be, how do we, the people maybe like Ted who, you know, are lukewarm on the idea, how do we encourage the establishment and other parties as well to take on that? That we're not, I want to include Ted in the establishment, but how do we encourage people not to be afraid of the conversations about New Ireland? And just a second, I suppose, point and maybe question, there was rallies taking place across Ireland today, including Cork, under the banner Time for Truth. And it was based on families who've lost people through the conflict. And James mentioned that the British government isn't a reliable partner. And of course, Boris is pushing this thing about an amnesty as well. And what concerns the families primarily in 6 counties is an amnesty for British Armed Forces. So I suppose the point is, in the Citizens' Assembly, would you see that truth and reconciliation would be part of that and a part of New Ireland, and not kind of an amnesty that Boris Johnson is looking like to serve, I suppose, in service of his own constituency. Come on, Griff.
I might come to yourself, James, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks very much. Tate, actually, your contribution I found particularly fascinating, and I was thinking about it, and because I was doing a lot of research in history in the last couple of months, trying to go through what I'd been taught throughout my primary school education. Actually, as a matter of fact, was some of the best education I received on issues relating to, I suppose, the history of, formerly what had been invaders into Ireland through the Normans into the Vikings, and or Vikings into the Normans, and I suppose what happened in Northern Ireland as well with the arrival of the Scottish dynamic and what Northern Ireland is now today. And I think it's fascinating taking a step back and going through that again as an adult and learning more about that process and getting a better understanding of why we have Northern Ireland as it's currently formed. And I want to see that, and I used the word communication earlier on in relation to the tricolour, but I would really like to see that as a TD, as a public representative, about further education around the history of how we arrived where we're at here today. And obviously there was political decisions made in the last century that have been crucial. Many would disagree, and many would agree with what happened. But you know, from the point of view of how we arrived at those decisions at the start of the 20th century, is going to be absolutely top priority in terms of trying to get through the entirety of a conversation on a potential border poll on Irish reunification, regardless of when it actually comes up for a decision to be made on it. And that's something I want to see as a young man. I'm 24 years of age. I was 22 when I was elected. And many people from my generation, they don't understand the historical significance of that. And for Southern Republicans, you know, I'd like to see them having a better understanding of Northern Ireland from that point of view. And our education system here, you know, it's crucial that we would look at that particular topic. And something as well, a perspective I'd love to share with the room, Francis, is in relation to the gentleman from UCC that gave your contribution about coming into Ireland around Irishness, Francis. And you know, I grew up, I was born in 1997, and the first interaction I would have had from somebody who wasn't from Ireland, who moved here, wasn't until the early 2000s. I think it was in 2006 when a family from Ukraine attended my local primary school. And it wasn't until secondary education that I had the actual first opportunity to become friends with people who would be of non-Irish ethnic origin, or they're not even from the European area, you know, and persons of colour as well. And that is a very new concept for so many people. And through the eyes of a child and growing up in Ireland, I'm used to that. And I think it's something that many people from my generation now, thankfully, you know, that they are used to that. I think many people in older generations, you know, there's still a journey that we have to go on that to make sure that people who do not originally come from Ireland, you know, that they feel at home here, that their children now, many thousands of children that have been born whose parents did not come from Ireland, that their families also feel welcome here. And that's going to be a growing issue in the Republic of Ireland, because we know it's becoming a more multicultural society, which I think is a good thing. But, you know, it will become more of a political issue. And the political establishment, I think, which you referred to in your contribution as well, we have a duty to preempt divisions that may arise in the future and to prevent the current ones from increasingly growing. And that's something that does worry me as the youngest TD in the Dáil, and I want to say that to you. I'm conscious I am the only elected representative here in the panel. There are other TDs here in the room. I see Tommy and I see Donica as well, another elected representative. But I just wanted to make sure you heard that message from me as well. And I hope that the chairperson, Francis, doesn't mind me making that point as well. Is that okay?
Thanks, James. Tadhg, do you want to respond to any of the comments?
I might just, if I can, just quickly say that Amanda's point, and it's nice to meet you. I just thought that was one of the most powerful moments in the room as well, and it's important to acknowledge it. And I just thought to myself, like, I wouldn't have thought that he felt that way. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of what we're doing here, that like people are throwing stuff out and sharing their opinions, and listening to him, I was kind of thinking like, well, we are, sadly, in the South, we can be a little bit of a country of othering. Mm-hmm. You know, and we other on race, and we other towards people with disabilities. You know, like in 2015, there was an act passed in this country, you know, ensuring rights for people with disabilities, that they would have a say over all vital aspects of their lives, including where they're living, and that hasn't been acted on in 6 years. You know, so it's race, it's people with disabilities, it's single mothers, and that's why we go back to, I think, Ireland is also partitioned in terms of haves and have-nots, and it's always been that way, I think. And that's, I think, why we're here, is to kind of almost rip it up and start again, and to listen to people like Aman and listen to other people's opinions where they feel excluded, then the onus is on them to make them feel included. And I think it's just a great point to make at the outset of these discussions, that it doesn't all become about constitutions, flags, and orange and green and the ever-growing middle ground. So, yeah.
Great stuff. So I know we're running out of time. Laura, you want to respond there? And then we have 2 more questions, I think, is all we have time for. That's okay. I know Donncha and Tommy. So, Laura,
I just wanted to make a really quick point. Just I think as well, you know, as part of these discussions that we're having, and, you know, the different panels across the country, that you know, that they are diverse. But I suppose one thing that just came into my mind there as well, you know, I think there is an onus on, you know, public representatives and political parties to ensure that when they're recruiting people to run for election, that's diverse too. Because, you know, if you look at our Dáil, how many people of colour are represented? We had our first traveller woman appointed to Seanad last year, the fantastic Eileen Flynn, for example. I was reading in the news there recently, I think the first traveller ever was appointed, you know, as a member of An Garda Síochána. So I think representation is really, really important, and I think it's, you know, it's definitely an onus on, you know, Ireland's future and us to make sure that as many voices as possible are represented, you know, in these discussions.
Absolutely. And question, Donncha, and then we'll come to yourself. Maybe you could ask them together, if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Donncha O'Leary. I'm a Sinn Féin TD here in Cork, and welcome to everyone here who's travelled here. Look, I mean, I suppose the first thing I wanted to say, just in relation to Ted's point, and it's really welcome that, I suppose, people are coming to meetings like this and making points like that, because there's no point in kidding ourselves that this discussion is going to be all agreement. It would be a fruitless conversation if that was the case. But I suppose it comes back to, I suppose, the point that Tadhg was making in terms of the hurt that Northern Nationalists feel. If we adopt the attitude that a border poll must be put off until all issues are resolved, that treats the aspirations of Northern Nationalists and those who in the North who aspire to Irish unity as a lesser aspiration. It treats it as a lesser aspiration than the status quo, and that the status quo is somehow superior. And I don't believe that that can be the case. There's no doubt but that the conversation will be difficult at times, but I do believe that momentum is moving in that direction. And I think there's a wider acceptance in that in the North across nationalism and unionism than perhaps there is in the South at this point. I suppose a question, and just a further point, is, look, I mean, I think in pitching, I suppose, the proposition for Irish unity, there's a bit of a balance to be struck, because that there is a need to reassure and there's a need to offer stability. But it will be pointless and it will be fruitless if a united Ireland is not radically and substantially different. It has to offer something new, something significantly new, and something better. And that's, I suppose, why I like the title of Ireland's Future. Is that it's not like, you know, we can learn lessons from German reunification, but it's not like that. It isn't like that. You're not absorbing one part of the country into an already existing state. It has to be something radically new. The question I was going to ask, and if it's not too much of a liberty, I might put it to yourself, Francis, as the chair, is I suppose there's a lot of people in this room, and I'd say across the city and across the country, that wonder what they can do to support Irish unity and what they can do to work towards Irish unity. And some, like myself, will join Sinn Féin, and I'd encourage anyone to join Sinn Féin, and others will join Fianna Fáil, and I suppose support that aspiration that way. But is there a role for organising on a local basis in organisations such as Ireland's Future? Is there a function for, and perhaps not, but is there a function for broad cross-party organisations in Cork and in Kerry and Waterford and whatever?
Yeah, great question, and I'll come back to that in a little while. Tommy?
I'm Thomas Gould, I'm a Sinn Féin TD for Cork North Central, and I'm an Irish Republican who believes in a 32-county Republican socialist state. But that's fine for me to say. You know, I have my beliefs, and I'm really proud of my beliefs. And we talk about different things. I was the first person from Loughnahini to be elected to the Dáil, which is something I am very proud of, and my family are very proud of. But I'm really happy I'm here today. I think it's a brilliant discussion. It's actually the tone of the way the conversation is going, I think, is is really exciting for me. I firmly believe that if we're going to have a future and a united Ireland, it has to be inclusive. And just to say it has to be inclusive, like anyone can run off that line. But when we look at the past and we look at what happened, what the church did, and can I say this, I have a very strong faith. But I know the harm the church did and the state did. When you look at the mother-baby homes and you look at all the other scandals, the sexual abuse, and that was supported by the state. So if we're going to have a new united Ireland with a new future, including everyone, we have to have a whole new government. And like, to be fair to James, he made points about the system and about a shared Ireland. We need the civil servants, we need the government, not political parties, because political parties are different to a government. We need the government now to set examples, whether it's civil servants, whether it's teachers who play a huge role, and my wife here, she's a teacher. Like, the way we teach history, both north and south, the whole lot has to be looked at. And the chap made a point there earlier on about what does it mean to be Irish. This is what Ireland's future is about. I believe the core part about the discussions we're going to have is, what does it mean to be Irish anywhere on this island? And I was out canvassing for the marriage equality bill, and my daughter Aoife was with me at the time. She was only about 10. And this lovely lady came up to me afterwards and she said, Thomas, you know, we vote for you here as a Scrán Bragha where I live, but is it right for your 10-year-old daughter to be out dropping leaflets for marriage equality? So I called Aoife over. I said, Aoife, what are you doing? She said, we're allowing two people to love each other to get married. And this is the core of talking about young people, and Karen's point about the comments that young people made. We see young people on the streets yesterday looking about trying to save our planet, right? I have a vested interest because I believe in what I believe. But young people, if we listen to them and try to respect them and get them involved, that's the way the country must go. But as a united Ireland, in whatever form it takes, and I'm willing to work with everyone on that. And the last point I'd say is, I'm willing to stay out of the conversation. Because people might look at me as a politician saying, he's a Sinn Féin Republican, he wants a certain thing. I have no problem stepping back to give people the space they need to have the conversation. So listen, I'm delighted to be here today. I really enjoyed it. And I just hope more and more people will attend these events all around the country, because I think these conversations are the way to go. So go to Míle Mágat.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you. So if it's okay, I know we started a little bit late, but I just want to give, like, maybe the panel, like, the final comment. I'd like to go to everybody to give a final comment, and then I'll answer Donncha's question as to what next steps would be from Ireland's Future's point of view. So, James, would you like to?
Thanks very much, Francis. And just once again to say how wonderful it is to be here with all of you again, even to be back in a room with people after the last 2 years. It's just wonderful. To Jerry and everybody in Ireland's Future, I feel so privileged to be in a position to talk about one of the greatest issues of our time. And, you know, conversations like these, you know, these are going to be crucial over the next number of years, as I really do feel a momentum is starting to build. And as a public representative, as the youngest TD in the country, I'm honoured to give my own perspective to all of you on where we are going. And I'd encourage all of you, when you're going home tonight, maybe to get the perspective around the dinner table as to what other people's views are who have not been here today. So we grow this conversation and we help to grow the work and the organisation that is Ireland's Future, and I would be delighted to play a role in that. You know, just summarising some of the points that have been made here, I've learned an awful lot from the floor here tonight as a TD. You know, some of the historical problems that we've had in Ireland, even the ones we're going through at the moment, and how important finding solutions to those issues are going to be able to successfully one day unite the 32 counties of the Republic of Ireland. And I think that has to be said, and it's very, very important to me. I'm conscious that I suppose there's time limits on events, and there are other speakers here who'd like to give their concluding remarks. But above all else, I just want to say thank you, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thanks, James. Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, just very quickly, I want to say thank you for the privilege of being here. I have loved it. I hope you have as well. I don't know about you, but it gives me a real sense of hope. I really want to highlight what the gentleman said here, because I think that was powerful. There was a recognition of understanding and that desire to understand our neighbour, and even willing to say, look, I'm going to put my shoulder to the wheel, but I'm willing actually to step back that others can be heard. That's what it's about. And I think that there's a little phrase that I'd want to leave with you as a theologian, okay? I've got to get in here. It's solvitur ambulando. It is solved as we walk. There are lots of questions and wonderings, and what about this and what about that? But we've begun to journey and walk together. And I am confident just in this first meeting that great days are ahead. And we need to continue to listen and move forward together. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. First of all, thank you to everyone. It just feels like we're all part of something really special, like, without overestimating, I think, and it's been lovely sitting here and listening. And I'll just sum up by saying, or just the final thing I'd say, I think it could all be won and lost on the economic argument. So if I was to say anything to people, if you're passionate about winning a referendum, read up on the economics. I'm certainly no economist. I'm just a so-called comedian. But if you read up a little bit on the economics, usually that can be the conversation stopper, where people say, look, we can't afford it. But if you even just look into it a little bit, like, not only can we afford it, but we need it. Economically, we need it. So the conversation can stop at the fact that, there's this kind of grant of 10 billion, with a figure might be less than that for the North. And just think of the economic opportunities, as I say, of getting rid of all that bureaucracy, the two jurisdictions competing for investment. So I think if we want to win the referendum, start talking economics with your friends. And other than that, it's just been an honour to be a very small part of this. And I'd like to echo Tommy as well. I would happily step out of all discussions if we ultimately got what we all want. So thank you.
Thanks.
Ola.
I would like to say thank you for having me. And I suppose my last remark would be that we keep an open mind. I know what we don't know, we always have fear around it. So you don't understand my culture. It's very normal that you would have that perspective of, I don't know what she's on about. I just want to encourage all of us to keep an open mind and not have that preconceived notion that this person is going to harm me or whatever. I have been propositioned by men, white Irish men, and that never changed my perspective of Irish people are welcoming. They are nice. I've been, every tribe has their own nasty people, and that shouldn't be our basis for how we see other people out there. And I also want to encourage us to go back home tonight and have that quality conversations with people who look up to us as maybe mentors, or the dads and the moms. I always say to my friends, I don't want to sit down at the dinner table and talk to my children about racism or homophobia or all these, I call it stupid things that human beings have in their minds. I want to sit down with my children at the dinner table and have beautiful conversations about what they would wear to prom, what they would wear to their friends' birthday parties, conversations that is, commensurate to their age. I have a 12-year-old son, I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. I don't want to, put my child on the bus to school in the morning and tell them, stay out of trouble. No. I want to, be able to tell them, go there and have fun, have a nice day, and then come back to me whole. And, I want us to be that, be the change we want to see. We want to see a quality future. We want to see a future that is devoid of superiority, or a future that is devoid of, my race is superior to yours, my class is superior to yours. I want to see an all-inclusive society, a society that I can knock on your door without fear, and you would extend that arm of friendship. I live in Ballyhonest, and I've lived there since I arrived in Ireland. And I do not have any Irish friend that I've said, I have gone to visit in Ballyhonest. There is that air of, I don't know what she's about. neither does she know who I am about. But when we meet out there, we are still friends. I want us to have that kind of cordial relationship where I can say, I want to go and visit this person. And there won't be that fear of uncertainty or what would happen. I hope that we mirror that change that we want to see. And I wish, above all, that I leave this direct provision this year. That's one of my wishes, you know. I'm just getting all these degrees and throwing it under the table. And it's not just me. There are a lot of us like that. There are asylum seekers who are doing their PhD in Ireland. Imagine having a PhD and still not being able to use that degree to do anything. I want to give back to this society that allowed me in the first place. And I hope to God that people like myself and my fellow asylum seekers who are still holed up in this system will look back and say, it's been a tough journey, but we stood tall, and we were not, we were not discouraged. We still, broke boundaries and achieved a lot, and be able to give back to the Irish society. Thank you.
And last but not least, Laura.
Yeah, so I just want to say I think this has been one of the most illuminating, discussions and events that I've been at in a very, very long time. And I think, given that this is the first event of a series, I'm really excited to see what discussions will come out of future events. I think it was really open and honest discussion that we had here today. And I just want to say thanks to the chair, Senator Frances Black, for facilitating that. And I've learned so much from my fellow panelists and just everyone in the room here today. And I think what Donncha actually said is really, really resonated with me, is that, this can't just be about, building the same again. We need to look to the future, and we need to see how we can make that better in terms of housing, like you mentioned, in terms of education, in terms of the economy, in terms of healthcare. And I just think it's a really exciting campaign. I think this is probably going to be one of the most exciting political discussions and campaigns of my lifetime, and I'm really excited to play a part in that. And this is something that is coming down the line. There will be a vote, and I think we need to be ready. We need to be prepared, and we need to work together and listen to each other. So I just want to say thank you for having me here today.
Thanks. So let me finish by saying thank you all very, very much. A huge thank you to all our panellists. I know some of you have travelled from far and near, so we really appreciate you coming today. Just to give you a little bit of an understanding as to where we are from an Ireland's future point of view, and we do, as Donncha says, we do need your support. All we want to do is have this conversation. We really just want to drive this conversation. We want to hear what people's fears are. We want to hear, and we welcome people from all political backgrounds, from all cultures, from just across the board. And it's very, very important that we hear what you have to say. And some people will feel fearful around it, and that's okay, and may not want a border poll, and some people do want a border poll. We want to hear what you have to say, and that's what's really important here. Now, what we hope to do is, this is the very beginning of a lot of our meetings across the country. I think our next one is in Galway. It'll all be online. But our main aim is to have a big event next year in October 2022 in the Tree Arena, where we hope to pack out the place. And what we'd love here particularly from the Cork contingent of ye coming to this event, is that if you could meet up, if you could stay in contact with us in Ireland's future, let us know what you can do in your community, bring people with you, keep that discussion going, have that discussion tonight around the kitchen table. What are people's fears? I'm having it all the time with my family, with my friends, and it's just having the discussion and not be afraid to have the discussion. Because often when we hear when people hear, United Ireland, we can't talk about that, there's something in us that stops us from even having the discussion. And I'm asking you all to not be afraid to have that discussion. Let's be open and honest with each other. Really, it's really important. Let's talk to the community, the Unionist community, who wants to have that discussion. Ian Marshall was a senator in the last in the last Dáil, in the last term. Unfortunately, he didn't get in this time around. He was brought in originally by Leo Varadkar. He was the head of the farming unionist community in the north, and he was constantly saying we have to be open to these conversations because it is coming down the line. And finally, I just want to say, it's all about planning and preparing, you know. And I know that Laura would have done a lot of planning and preparing for referendums that she was involved in. We have to talk about it. We have to plan and prepare. And if a citizens' assembly comes down the road, that would be my dream, is to have a citizens' assembly, but plan and prepare for a border poll for and if and when it comes down the road. So I want to thank you all so much. Please stay in contact with us, Ireland's Future. A huge thanks to Jerry Carlisle, who's a walking gem. He's the CEO of Ireland's Future. He travelled from Belfast last night, as did Reverend Karen, and I know all of you travelled from Ballyhaunis. Jerry is playing the gem. I'm the chair of Ireland's Future, and we have Niall Murphy as the secretary, and then we have board members, all citizens who just want to have this conversation. So Gura Mila Mahagav, and we thank you sincerely. Please keep in touch. Please leave your phone numbers and email addresses with us if you want to continue this conversation. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Francis.